Hello. Hi, Laura. So if anybody's on, you can say hey in the chat. You do have to be signed into YouTube in order to say hello. But hello, thanks for joining me on this Sunday. I've been having a lot of fun with my tubes, so I'm very excited about this. I'm going to wait just a couple of minutes. We can get a few more people on before I start, but welcome everybody. Hey, Tammy, good to see you. I haven't done one of these in a while. Laura Jean and I used to do them every month in the before times. All right. So welcome, party people. Again, I'm going to wait a couple of minutes before I get started. It's just a minute before 12:30. Hoping my office doesn't look too chaotic behind me. Oh, Tammy, I put some makeup on too. I ate my lipstick off, I think, but I put some eyeshadow in. Hi, Amy. Well, I'm glad you, it's fun to put makeup on, Tammy. My 9, 8, I cannot remember how old my kids are, but my youngest, my 4th grader, her favorite thing in the world is putting on makeup. And so she's not allowed to wear makeup at school, but she wears makeup all the time. It is a makeup kind of day. And yes, Lord Jean, it is like a Cinnabon, isn't it? Why didn't we ever get Cinnabons at the airport, Laura? Thank you. She is 9 and 11. Thank you. Ridiculous. So I'm so glad people are joining me today. I'm super excited. Like I said, I've been playing around a lot and I have very, very high goals for how many pairs of socks and mitts I can get finished in the next little while. So we'll see if that actually happens. But I'm super excited about this business and about being able to share some tips and tricks with you today. And just a new way to make socks. I think anybody that knows me well can attest to the fact that I do not need more hand knit socks, but I love making them, and this will allow me to make even more. So I hope your tootsies are cold, Lord Jean. But this is my big ol', yes, I am recording this, Amy. It'll be posted, it'll be on my YouTube channel where you access this, and you'll be able to see it. You'll be able to see the comments as well. But then you can pause if there's anything that you need to, or rewind if you need to hear something else. But Sunday homework, I'm so sorry about Sunday homework. Okay, so I am Shannon Squire. Hello. For those who don't know me, I think most of who has already said hi, I know in person, but just in case. And I'm the new owner of this little business. And it's a sock tube cranking business. And the tubes can be used to make socks, fingerless mitts, leg warmers. Laura Jean's making some leg warmers out of some larger circumference tubes, neck warmers, and I'm sure a lot of other things that I will be exploring as I kind of deep dive into this business a little more. So like I said earlier, I love making socks. It is my go-to, and it's my most soothing creation. It's my most soothing creative outlet is making socks. And so I had sent a bunch of mostly self-striping sock yarn to the ladies that own this business before me. It used to be called Side Hustle Socks, and got tons of tubes cranked. And last year at Thanksgiving, I was visiting my folks in Montana, and I learned how, how to follow the instructions and how to make the socks. And I just remember sitting at my mom and dad's table, just being amazed at how magical it was. I'd never done an afterthought heel. And so I made a bunch. I made some for Laura Jean, some for me. And then I haven't really done anything with the tubes since. So once I decided that I was going to buy the business, I thought, oh my gosh, I need to, kind of refamiliarize myself with how to make these socks. So I have made a couple socks. This is a super fun one that's for Hazel for Christmas. And then in the last couple of days, I used another tube to make a pair of fingerless mitts that are going to be for Laura Jean. So I had some questions about what kind of skills you need to make these. You definitely need to understand, some kind of advanced beginner concepts in knitting, because you are going to be doing things like picking up stitches, measuring your gauge, and have to be able to recognize what, kind of read your knitting and know what stitches look like. Those are all things that come with practice, and you can, all of those things, you can also fake it till you make it, I feel like, but those are some of the skills you need to do. And decreasing, you don't need to do any increasing, but decreasing, knitting, purling. So I have my machine here. I moved it over here next to me so y'all can see it. But this is, she had a name. Her name was Josephine with Margaret and Hillary. I haven't named her, but she's really, she's really awesome. Look at her go. And so I'm not going to crank because it's kind of loud, but I did make, I was playing around and I made this 9 color tube a couple of days ago. So let's talk a little bit about what you need to do when you are making your socks. The patterns all come, the tubes all come with a pattern, and it was written by the previous owners, and it's a wonderful pattern. I will be, kind of reformatting it at some point, and I did add a different sock, a different toe, the kind of toe I do, which is a more rounded toe, to the pattern. And I also tweaked this a little bit to reflect numbers for a 72-inch sock. But when you get your pattern, this is the first page, and it goes over what you need, which is a knit tube, 2 sizes of circular needles. US 1 is what I always use and what is called for in the pattern. You just want to make sure you're getting the same gauge. So it is about 30 stitches to 4 inches. So, it's between 7.5 and 8.5 stitches per inch. And you want to make sure you're using whatever needles you use to make a fingering weight sock and to get that gauge. So for some people, they're looser knitters and they need to go down in needle size. And for some people, they're tighter knitters and they need to go up in needle size. For me, it's a US 1 2.25 millimeter needle. And then you also need locking stitch markers or safety pins. And I have a couple different things to show you. You can use these little clover plastic locking markers. You want to be able to close it and open it because you're going to be marking spaces. Or you can use these little guys, which also open. You can also use the coilless safety pins, which I don't have any right here, or you can use pieces of yarn. So you can use a contrasting color of yarn and use a tapestry needle to put it where you want it to be. You just need something that you'll be able to see on the fabric that you're using to mark stitches. And then also a tapestry needle, and that's to weave your ends in. I like to use a sharp tapestry needle. So what I usually use is I think it's a 28 chenille needle. And that's what I've been using a lot lately. All right. So a 60 stitch tube will fit many different sizes of foot, from about like a large child size, like Hazel, she wears like a 4 in children's, up to a women's or a men's foot, as long as the foot isn't too wide. And if it is wider, then you might want to go up to a 72 stitch sock tube. The pattern has information for both of those because you basically do the same thing. It's just where you're marking, where you're putting your heel in and your toe and your cuff in are a little different on the 72 stitch because there are more stitches around. So your decreased sections are going to take up more rows. So they're going to be deeper. Does anybody have any questions so far? Because I feel like I'm just kind of babbling. One of the good things about this is you don't see if people's eyes are glazing over, but one of the bad things is you don't know if you're connecting and making sense. So I'm just kind of going over the pattern. Oh, thanks, Laura. And so when you are getting ready to do your sock, what you're going to do is you're going to take your tube and you're going to mark where you're going to put the different parts of your sock. This is basically a tube version of this little chart that's shown on the pattern. And so what we're doing here is marking where the heel is. Oh no, this is where the heel is. This is marking where the heel is. This is where the cuff is. This is where the toe is. So this is for a short, hi Frances. This is for kind of a short foot. Rosemary, yes, the patterns right now are available if you purchase the tubes, but I'm going to format them and put them up on Etsy so you can purchase them separately if that's all you need. And if you've purchased a tube in the past, or if you've purchased a tube since I started doing this, on the label, there's a link to where the patterns are. And you also get a little kind of link to that after your purchase goes through. All right, so what you're going to need to know is how long the foot is that you're making the sock for, and that's how you know where to place the heel. So the first instruction says, mark the tube. Place markers for the tube's midpoint and heel locations as shown in the drawing. Adjust the heel placement if needed for a shorter or longer foot length. We recommend working the heels, toes, and cuffs in the following order. This is a good order to work when you're first starting out. And then you can tweak, you can do a toe first after you kind of understand what you're doing and what length you need. Heel number 1 and then toe number 1. Then you divide the tube in half, do your toe number 2, heel number 2, cuff number 1, and cuff number 2. So that's on the pattern, and it just kind of gives you an idea just so so you give yourself a little bit of leeway as you're doing your heel for the first time. So when you're marking your heel, what you're going to do is you're going to put a marker. Tracy, that is just fine. You can do it in any order you want. It's just, like I said, it's just a suggestion. I think because the heel is like the most complicated part. And so the suggestion is just to do that first heel first, so you kind of know what you're doing and then can measure from there. So what you're going to do is you're going to mark the stitches that surround your heel stitches. For this pattern, you're going to do your heel on half of your tube stitches. So if you're doing a 60 stitch sock, you're going to do your heel on 30 stitches. And if you're doing a 72 stitch sock, you're going to be doing your heel on 36 stitches. This is an afterthought heel. I got to just stop for a minute and say congratulations, Tracy. Tracy had some concerns about Kitchenering because it's really complicated when you don't do it a lot, and she did it. And Kitchenering is one of those things, like anything with knitting. super confusing until you do it a couple of times and then it starts to make sense. I feel like maybe that's just life too. So you're going to mark your stitches. I had everything all like in great piles and everything, but my desk is kind of small, so I'm a little jumbly right now. And so after you mark your stitches, you're going to use a needle to pick up the stitches around your heel. And so this is something, thank you, Rosemary. There are multiple afterthought ways to do a heel. What's shown here is a very simple way. As I play more and more, I'll probably add more options. But this is just a very simple, decreasing every other round afterthought heel. One of the samples that I got along with this kit had more of a star heel, so it was more rounded. So yeah, absolutely. I think as with anything knitting wise, there are almost as many ways to do anything as there are people who knit, you know? So yeah, I feel like my first Kitcheners did not look good, and I was thinking, what am I doing wrong? But I think with a lot of other things with knitting, practice makes better, and the more you do it, the more you know how snug to pull as you're Kitchenering. So I'm proud of you. Lumpy or not, I'm proud of you. It's going to hold together. So what you're going to do when you pick up your heel stitches is you're going to insert your needle into the right leg of every one of those 30 or 36 stitches in the row above and below the heel row. So that was a little confusing for me at first, but remember that the actual heel row is the row that you're going to cut. And so you want to capture the stitches that are above and below that row and have one row completely by itself in the middle. And so this, they used yarn to show, but this you would use either 2 tips of needles or 2 separate needles. And I do feel like it's easier to use 2 separate needles when you are first doing it. So if you do have 2 needles, use those. If you don't, I would suggest at least a 32-inch long circular to be able to pick up both of these comfortably and not be tugging and pulling. And then after that is the thing that strikes fear into the hearts of knitters everywhere. Cutting on purpose your knitting. So because this tube doesn't have a space for a heel, and because we need to change the direction, we need to insert this heel so we can change the direction of the knitting because our feet go like this instead of like this. If you just put a tube on, you could wear it, and tube socks are things. They're just not very comfortable. It would get super baggy in the front right here. And you might want to try it just to see what that's like. Just, kind of put a tube on your foot and see what that's like. But what we're going to do is we're going to cut. So we've got our needles surrounding our heel row. And then we're going to go right in the center and we're going to take some sharp needles. And we're going to cut one of the legs of the heel row right in the center. And then I always use the tip of my needles to kind of tease out the yarn and unravel it. Go slowly, because what you're going to do, and it says this in the pattern, is you're going to unravel until you still have 2 of those stitches not unraveled. And what that does is it makes sure that you don't have a little hole in the center of your heel. So that's what you do. And then after you're done with that, it's a technique that those of you who do more like a certain kind of toe will recognize, but you're going to start working around and you're going to do 1 row of knit plain, 1 row where you decrease a stitch on either side of the bottom of the heel and on either side of the top of the heel, and then 1 round plain. And those of you who ordered in the first kind of month. This business has been open. Got one of these little, it's backwards because, of course, but one of these little progress keepers that Maria from A Needle Runs Through It made for me. And they are great things to put right where you're starting, either your toe or your heel, and then you know where your round begins because it all looks the same as you're working around. So that's how you do the heel. You're gonna, like I said, you're gonna decrease every other round. And then when you get down to your final stitches, you're going to use Kitchener, which we've been talking about, to close that up. Kitchener, I have a photo tutorial on my website, shannonsquire.com, for the Kitchener stitch. And Kitchener is one of the things that I'm going to create a video soon about. So Amy asked, do I keep it all together long while you are knitting? It's up to you, really. The ones I have done that. I have kept them together because some of the tubes are very, very long. Like some of these, 450-yard self-striping tubes that I got made are super long. So I want to optimize the yarn as much as possible. And I'm not yet at a place where I know exactly how long I like my socks and all of that jazz. So I have been keeping them together. So this is when I started. I started the toe first. Then I'm going to add the heel, figure out my cuff. Then I will cut it and start again. But it's really up to you. If you know for sure you're going to utilize pretty much all of your tube, you can just cut it in half. Rosemary asks, how many stitches do you Kitchener? It depends on which of the patterns you're using. For the, let's see. For the 60 stitch tube, this pattern tells you to go until you have 10 stitches on each needle. So 20 stitches total, and then you're going to Kitchener those 10 stitches together. For the 72 stitch sock, I made a pair for Stefan and I went to 12 stitches, and that was a great heel depth and a great width for the back of the heel. Nice, Tracy, that's super awesome. Yeah, so like I said, I did do a photo tutorial for Kitchener, and I'm going to be doing a video. I might have done a video. Anyway, I think I did do a video. I'll tell you, videos are a little harder because, oh my goodness, I have to do so many takes when I do a video tutorial. If it's not me saying something stupid or swearing, it's, my kids or my puppy coming in here and barking at me. So that's how you do the heel. And the heel is the most complicated part of the tube. I'm glad you feel inspired, Laura Jean. It's all I want to do right now. But I have a couple other tips and tricks that I've come across. I will say self-striping yarn. If you want to, it's really, it's really easy to have twinny socks. Remember that as you are getting ready to do something, if you want to start, like if I wanted to start with this dark blue, then I would have cut the tube somewhere in the orange or even the red, because I'm going to have to unravel. So you're going to have a couple, you're going to have some rounds, because it's really hard to cut straight across a whole round. So you're going to have some rounds that have just little teensy loops of yarn that you've cut, and then you're going to have to unravel, and you want to have tails. So make sure you keep that in mind, that you can't just cut right where you want it to be. Same goes for length. You want to have just a little bit left. You want to have a couple rounds of leeway so you can have the length that you want. Let me think. Any other questions? I'm going to look at my notes and see if there was anything else that I wanted to make sure I talk about. Oh, yes, there was one other thing. So when you're doing a sock, you need to have your toe lined up completely with your heel, right? You want to have your toe decreases start at the sides where your heel was inserted. because if you don't, then you're going to have, it's going to kind of twist, right? So you want to have everything lined up. Sometimes when things, when there's a stockinette tube, a little bit of bias can happen with the stockinette fabric. So what I have done on some of mine is I get a contrasting color of yarn. And if I start with the heel or if I start with the toe, I go right in the center of those stitches. So this is on the stitch surrounding the heel. And I'm just running a strand of yarn all the way. And so what I've done with this was I went all the way from the heel all the way down to where I'm going to start my toe so I can mark it. Because even a little bit of bias and a couple stitches is going to make a sock that doesn't feel so good because it's twisted a little. So you can just eyeball it, but I like to, I don't eyeball. I don't eyeball stuff. I mean, I do, but I shouldn't, because you can really mess up that way. And it would suck to have to take out your toe because you're a couple stitches off and it's kind of crunked over. So that was another tip that I wanted to share with you. I did add, there are 2 options for the toe in the pattern. And one is the original toe as written, which is doing the same thing as your heel. So you're basically doing a round of regular knit, and then you're doing decreases, decreases, and then on the back decreases, decreases, and doing those 2 rounds again and again. And it makes this, it makes more of a, it's called a square toe because it's a little bit pointy. I do a rounded toe, and that's what I do for all of my socks. Hey, Elba, good to see you. So Elba's here, who has another sock tube business called Totally Tubular Socks, which is the coolest name. And I was like, oh, I'm going to name this business Totally Tubular, and then realized she had already taken it because I'm very much an 80s girl. So this is my more rounded toe, and the instructions are written, but what it does is it has you do more gradual decreases instead of every other round. And then when you get to a certain point, you do decreases every round. So it kind of rounds it out a little more. And here they are together, so you can see the difference. Personal preference as to what, which toe you do. I just have always liked the rounded toes better. For the cuff, when you do your cuff stitches, it doesn't matter as much when you do the cuff where it's always nice to start at the same place, right? But I'll answer that question in a second, Amy. That's a great one. Anything that is a multiple of the number of stitches you're working on. So for a 60 stitch tube, you can do anything that's a multiple of 2, 3, 4, 5, any kind of patterning that you want to do. You can even, kind of do a, take it down a little bit and do a, like a picot top where you knit for a little bit, then you do a round of knit 2 together, yarn overs, and then you knit for a little bit and then fold it in and sew it down. That's a cute little top. I always like to have a little bit of ribbing, especially if my cuffs are or my leg is going to be on the taller side, because it helps to hold it up. But if you're making ankle socks, that doesn't matter so much. So any kind of patterning you want to do. I like a knit 2, purl 2 ribbing a great deal. These are both those. I think knit 1, purl 2, or knit 1, purl 1 looks great. Knit 1, purl 2 looks great. So anything you want to do, and you can make the cuff as long or as short as you want to. The longer cuff you have on a sock, the more either knit 1, purl 1 or knit 2, purl 2 ribbing, the better chance you have of it staying up. But if that's not necessary, that's fine. And Amy, that's not silly at all. And that's something that I've been meaning to add to the pattern. I have in my more traditional sock knitting patterns, a lot of them have a kind of a cheat sheet for shoe size / how long a foot is. So if you're making them for gifts, you're going to have to find out the shoe size of somebody. And then you can figure out the length. But, Rosemary, that's a good question too, and one I want to talk about. I will say that there's a lot of, there are ways to kind of get around if you don't know the exact size of someone, or if you make a sock a little bit longer than it needs to be, but the person's foot is wider, then that will fit them. And if you make the sock a little bit shorter than it needs to be, but their foot is narrower, they can pull it out. So if I make some of these tubes for Astrid, who's got smaller feet, I will likely just make them a little bit shorter than they need to be, and then her foot will stretch them out and they'll fit better. I don't know if that makes sense. And as far as a cast off, I like to do Jenny's Surprisingly Stretchy Bind Off, and the instructions for that are on knitty.com. And it is a great bind off because you're adding like a stitch's worth of extra yarn between each stitch. So it's super stretchy, very stretchy. And it's a little, it's a little bit decorative, right? Like you can tell that there's something going on there. I think it's really pretty. It works for any kind of iteration of ribbing. I'm going to find the mitts because I used them on that too. And so basically what it is when you're doing Jenny's Surprisingly Stretchy Bind Off is if you're going into a knit stitch, you're going to wrap the yarn around the needle. You're going to knit one, and then your next stitch is a knit stitch. You're going to wrap the yarn around the needle purlwise, because then it'll wrap around the needle a complete time and then go back before you do your knit stitch. And if your next stitch is a purl stitch, you're going to wrap the yarn around the needle knitwise, because it'll go all the way around and then come back around to the front. So you're adding as much extra yarn as possible between those stitches. And if that doesn't make sense, because it's something that really makes a lot more sense when you're like physically with somebody and can see it being done, knitty.com has a great photo tutorial for that. That's something I'll add to my list of video tutorials to eventually make too. I will say that they're not my video tutorials are not super high quality, and that's just me. So anybody else have any other questions? Real quick, the Mitt Pattern, which is something that you get also when you purchase a 60 stitch tube, uses the same technique for the thumb as is used for a heel for the socks. So you mark your stitches, you put your needles through, you cut, and the tails are just big enough that you can weave in a couple times with a short tapestry needle. So one thing quickly too about the mitts, because of the way they're constructed, there's no gusset. So normally when you're hand knitting fingerless mitts, you add a gusset because of the shape of your hand. Your thumb doesn't just stick onto the side of your hand. It kind of grows out. And so there's no gusset. So it's not, it gets a little, it doesn't fit the shape of your hand as much as a gusseted would. Rosemary, for the thumb for these, you use 12 for the 60 stitch, but then you do some decreasing so you don't have holes. So your thumb is basically on 20 stitches total, 10 for each, the top and the bottom. And I do want to play around with a 72 stitch tube and add instructions for that as well. You can finish them, Tammy. You can do it. It's really, it's like anything with knitting, where it's not necessarily hard. You just have to concentrate for the first couple of times and really think about it, and then it becomes a lot easier. That's awesome, Elba. Did you use the same kind of pattern that we have? Yeah, I think they're great. I think they're wonderful. Most of the tubes I have in the shop right now are about 6.5 inches, which makes a fingerless mitt that is about this long. which is perfect. I made this one a little bit longer. But I wanted to show y'all what that looks like too. So this is what the Fingerless Knit Kit, the ones that I have right now look like this. When I do them in the future, I likely will not add that. I'll just make a tube that's long enough that you can make fingerless mitts. You know, it'll probably be like 16 to 18 stitches. So then you can make longer ones if you'd like to. But these ones are perfect. They make a fingerless mitt that's about like this or like this. So yay, that's awesome, Elba. All right, does anybody have any other questions? This is fun. I am super excited to make more tubes. Aren't they so cute? I know. They're so adorable. And I've got a lot of really exciting things planned for after the first of the year. I'm going to be starting to take custom tubing requests after the first of the year. And I'm going to be working with Laura Jean and having some, I have mootsies in my hair, sorry. I will be working with Laura Jean and have some of her, my most favorite colorways of hers available for, to order kind of custom cranked tubes. Tammy, those Christmas ones are so cute. I love them too. They were ones that were done by Side Hustle. And I will say all of the tubes that I've been selling are ones that Side Hustle did. And they were part of, when I purchased the business, they were part of the business. So it was really hard to not keep them all for myself. And I do have a little pile of ones that I kept for myself or that I've sent to friends. So yay. Yeah, so if anybody has any other questions, let me know. And like I said, I'm going to be working on getting other things uploaded. So little videos that will help you. I did a video on picking up the stitches. I did it when I was working on one of these, but it's the same technique for the heel. And I'm going to try to work on getting that uploaded to YouTube at some point in the next couple of days. And I have a list of other videos I want to make as well. Yay, Albert. Yeah, I made some for my husband, some 72 stitch tubes, and they fit him perfectly. And I will say, here's a little word of warning. So I made these socks for Stefan, and then I wasn't, I did the math and everything to figure out length and, blah, blah, blah. But I wasn't sure if they'd be a little bit long for him. So I did not weave the ends in, and I gave them to him. And he wore them and he wore them and he wore them. And then he said, and then I totally forgot that I hadn't woven the ends in. And he said, hey, is there anything you can do about this? And he turned them inside out. And those ends were so like matted together. So I'm not going to be able to weave those ends in. I'm just going to have to cut them. And I think they're matted together enough that they're not going to unravel, but yeah, so I do have some 72 stitch tubes in the shop, and I am going to be playing around with the whole machine and practicing I haven't changed out the cylinder. I haven't done the ribbing, the ribbers, anything like that. So I'm going to work on those over kind of the winter break. And then hopefully by the first of the year, I will be confident enough that I can start taking custom orders and making different sizes. Tracy, I wish you lived by us too. Once Laura Jean opens the studio up for shopping, I will be there on some Fridays, if not all, with her, cranking tubes and taking orders and things like that too. But I know that you live very far away, so. Road trip, exactly. Yeah. And once life gets back to normal, we're probably going to have an epic party at the studio. So, yeah. So yeah, if anybody has any other questions, ask. I'll stay on for another little bit just to see. And if not, I so appreciate y'all coming and asking such good questions, because I made a list And a lot of the things you all asked were not on that. And that's wonderful because I was trying to think of everything I would have needed to say. And if you're watching this later, I hope this helps. And if you have any questions, any of you or anyone else, you can email getyoutubes@gmail.com. That's my YouTube's email address, or my regular one too. That works. Thanks, Laura. Yeah, this was fun. Thanks for joining me and spending a little time with me, and thanks for the support of my new business. I'm super excited about being a cranker. Stefan said I should call the business the Cranky You, but I thought that was a little too on the nose for me. Yeah. The good thing about this is that it is pretty fast, especially compared to actually knitting an entire sock. And the fingerless mitts are so fast. I mean, I'm a pretty fast knitter, but I had them done within 2 days of knitting, which is pretty good. So I hope y'all enjoy everything. Yeah, the decorative cups are super cute, aren't they, Rosemary? This fingerless mitt, they used a 2-stitch cable to do it. Thank you, Tammy. Thanks for coming. I appreciate the support, everybody. All right. Well, I'm going to say goodbye. Yay, Rosemary. I'm so glad you came. Yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. And I hope you have a good rest of your weekend. I hope you get some crafting time in. And yippee. Thanks, everybody.